I've always thought of myself as someone who lives a steady life. Work, home, a few close friends, and a routine that rarely changes. I liked the predictability. It gave me a sense of control, a sense of safety. The city outside could be chaotic, sirens screaming through the night, people rushing everywhere, but inside my world, things were calm, quiet, orderly. That's the way I preferred it, until the day she walked in and turned everything upside down. It started with a fire alarm. Not a real fire, or at least that's what we thought. I was sitting at my desk in the office, halfway through a report, when the shrill sound pierced the air. Everyone groaned and exchanged annoyed glances. False alarms weren't new in our building, and most of the time, we knew they meant nothing. Still, protocol demanded we evacuate, so we filed out into the street, grumbling under our breaths. That's when the fire trucks arrived. Red lights flashing, sirens cutting through the morning air, the trucks barreled down the street, as if the world was ending. My co-workers and I exchanged surprised looks. This time, it seemed more serious. Within moments, firefighters were spilling out of the trucks, moving with a kind of urgency that instantly put us on edge. And in the middle of them was her. She moved like fire herself, quick, unpredictable, untamed. Her helmet tucked under her arm, her short dark hair spilling across her forehead, she barked instructions to her team with a sharpness that left no room for hesitation. She had this intensity about her, the kind that drew your eyes and made it impossible to look away. I should have been worried about the building, about whether it was safe to go back inside, but all I could focus on was her. At first, I thought she was reckless. She charged forward without hesitation, disappearing into the building with two others while the rest of us stood frozen on the sidewalk. A couple of my co-workers muttered something about how crazy firefighters must be, running into danger while everyone else ran out. And maybe that was true. Maybe she was crazy. But there was something magnetic about the way she did it, like she belonged to the fire, like she wasn't afraid of being burned. 10 long minutes passed before she emerged again, her jacket streaked with soot, her eyes alight with adrenaline. In her arms, she carried a small boy, one of the kids from the daycare on the lower floor of the building. His mother screamed and ran forward, clutching him tightly, sobbing in relief. The woman, the firefighter, barely gave herself a second to breathe before turning back to check on the rest of her team. I couldn't stop staring. She was bold, commanding, and yet there was something strangely beautiful about the chaos that swirled around her. My co-workers had already started chatting, making jokes to ease the tension, but I stood rooted in place, my heart beating faster than it should have, when she finally pulled off her helmet and ran a hand through her messy hair. Her gaze swept across the crowd. And then, for the briefest second, our eyes met. It was nothing, just a glance. A flicker of recognition that shouldn't have meant anything. But something about the way she looked at me, like she could see right through the polished surface I'd built around myself, made me feel exposed. Vulnerable. I dropped my gaze quickly, but my chest tightened, as if I'd just been caught doing something I shouldn't. The building turned out to be fine. Just a malfunction in one of the electrical systems that had triggered smoke and set off the alarms. Nothing catastrophic, nothing lasting. Within an hour, we were allowed back inside, and the firefighters began to clear up their equipment. My co-workers joked about losing half a day of work for nothing, but I barely heard them. Because she was still there. Leaning against the side of the fire truck, helmet dangling from her fingers, she was laughing at something one of her team members said. Her laugh was unguarded, loud, the kind that drew attention without trying. I hated myself for staring, but I couldn't stop. She didn't belong to my world of neat schedules and tidy routines. She was wild, unpredictable, and untouchable, and yet, in that moment, all I could think about was how badly I wanted to know her. I told myself it was ridiculous. Just adrenaline, just the aftershocks of fear mixing with curiosity. But the truth settled uncomfortably in the pit of my stomach, she unsettled me. Her presence was like smoke, you couldn't grasp it, but it filled every corner of your lungs until you couldn't breathe the same way again. That night, long after the fire trucks had gone and the office had returned to its usual hum, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, still thinking about her. The reckless firefighter, who ran headfirst into danger while the rest of us stood back. The woman who made me lose control with just a glance. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew one thing for certain, something in my life had shifted. And I had no idea if I was ready for it. I didn't expect to see her again. After that fire alarm incident, I told myself she would remain nothing more than a striking memory, a reckless firefighter, who disrupted one ordinary morning and then disappeared back into the smoke where she belonged. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. It was a Saturday when I walked into a small cafe near my apartment, desperate for caffeine and maybe a quiet hour with a book. The place was crowded, people lining up for lattes and pastries, the low hum of conversations filling the air. I scanned the room, and there she was. Helmet nowhere in sight this time, her jacket slung over the back of her chair, she sat at a corner table with a mug in one hand and a newspaper in the other. Her hair was slightly damp, as if she'd just come from a shower, and she looked more like any other young woman unwinding on a weekend morning. But there was no mistaking her. My heart did this ridiculous little jump, and for a second, I considered turning around and leaving before she noticed me. But fate was cruel, or maybe kind, because at that exact moment, her eyes lifted from the paper and landed on mine. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by a slow, knowing smile. "Well, if it isn't Miss Office Building," she said as I passed by. Her voice had this low, teasing warmth that both irritated and intrigued me. I froze, caught off guard. "You remember me?" "Hard to forget someone who looked at me like I was insane," she said, setting her paper aside. "Sit with me. Unless you've got another fire alarm to run to." I should have walked away. That would have been the smart thing to do. But something in her tone, half challenge, half invitation, pulled me toward the empty chair across from her. Before I knew it, I was sitting down, my latte cooling untouched in my hands. Her name was Riley. She said it casually, like she didn't care whether I remembered it or not, but the name felt heavy, like something that would stay with me. She asked about my job, teased me for looking too put together on a Saturday, and told me stories about the firehouse that had me laughing despite myself. She had this way of speaking, fast and animated, her hands moving to match her words. I found myself drawn in, caught between annoyance at her recklessness and fascination with the fire that seemed to burn in her veins. That morning stretched into an hour, then two. And when we finally parted ways, I told myself again that it was nothing. Just coffee. Just coincidence. But then I saw her again. At first, it was small things, running into her at the grocery store, bumping into her at the park while she was jogging, even spotting her at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. Each time, she seemed almost amused, like fate was playing her favorite game. "Well, aren't you stalking me now?" she'd tease, and I'd roll my eyes, reminding her that the city wasn't exactly small. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just coincidence anymore. We were orbiting each other, drawn together by something I couldn't explain. Our conversations were always the same, banter, sharp words, her pushing boundaries while I tried to keep control. She'd flirt shamelessly, throwing out comments that made my cheeks burn. "You'd look good in my jacket," she said once, smirking as we stood in line at the grocery store. I shot her a glare. "Do you flirt with everyone this recklessly?" "Only with people who look like they might actually fall for it," she said without missing a beat. I wanted to scold her, to remind her that I wasn't some stranger to charm and toss aside. But the truth was, her words stayed with me long after we parted. I hated that. I hated how easily she got under my skin, how her voice lingered like smoke, curling around my thoughts when I least expected it. The problem was, she was everything I wasn't. Bold where I was cautious. Loud where I was quiet. Wild where I was orderly. She threw herself into everything, conversations, arguments, life itself, with no fear of getting burned. And I'd spent so much of my life avoiding the fire. The more we met, the more the tension grew. I'd catch myself smiling at her jokes, even when I wanted to stay serious. I'd notice the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, even in the middle of her reckless antics. And worst of all, I'd feel this warmth in my chest every time I heard her laugh. One evening, after another one of those unexpected run-ins, she walked me home. The night was cool, the city lights glowing around us. She told me about a fire call earlier that week, how she'd climbed 3 flights of stairs without backup, ignoring protocol just to reach someone faster. I stopped in my tracks, horrified. "Do you realize how reckless that is?" I demanded. "You could have been killed." She shrugged, like it was nothing. "If someone's life is on the line, I'm not going to waste time waiting." "You can't keep risking yourself like that," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "You're not invincible, Riley." She grinned, that infuriating grin that made me want to scream and laugh at the same time. "What's this? Are you worried about me?" I glared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Of course I'm worried. You drive me insane." For a moment, the teasing faded from her eyes. She stepped closer, closing the space between us until I could feel the heat radiating off her. "Maybe you like a little insanity," she murmured. My breath caught. The world around us seemed to go quiet, the city fading into a blur of lights and shadows. I should have stepped back, should have told her to stop. But instead, I stood frozen, my heart betraying me with every frantic beat. Finally, I forced myself to turn away, breaking the spell. "Good night, Riley," I said, my voice unsteady. As I walked into my building, I could feel her gaze on my back. Part of me wanted to turn around, to let her pull me into her chaos, to stop pretending I wasn't drawn to her. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because the truth was terrifying. Riley made me lose control. And for someone like me, who built her life around stability, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Riley wasn't supposed to slip past my defenses. But she did it anyway, slowly, unexpectedly, in ways I didn't even notice until it was too late. It started with the little things. She'd insist on walking me home if it was late, brushing off my protests with a stubborn, "It's not safe, and I don't like the idea of you walking alone." If I was carrying heavy groceries, she'd snatch the bags from my hands with that mischievous grin and say, "Relax, hero training makes me good at this." She'd remember the smallest details, how I always added cinnamon to my latte, or that I hated mornings unless I had quiet, and she'd tease me about them, but never cruelly. Those gestures should have been harmless. They weren't declarations, just the kind of things anyone might do. But when Riley did them, I felt the cracks forming in the walls I'd built around myself. One evening, we ended up at the park, sitting on a bench as the city glowed in the distance. I hadn't planned to spend the night with her, but somehow, our paths kept crossing, and somehow, I kept letting her pull me along. For once, she was quieter than usual. No reckless jokes, no teasing smirks. Just her staring out at the skyline with a faraway look in her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" I said softly, curious. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Depends. Is it going to be one of your sensible, lecture-style questions, or something real?" I raised an eyebrow. "Something real." That seemed to surprise her. She leaned back, folding her arms. "Go ahead then." "Why?" I asked. "Why firefighting? You don't exactly strike me as someone who follows rules." For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she exhaled, slow and heavy. "My dad was a firefighter," she said finally. He died on a call when I was 14. I froze, the weight of her words sinking in. She kept her eyes fixed on the skyline. I remember watching him put on his gear, watching him leave the house like he was walking into battle. I hated it. I hated that he chose fire over us, over me. But at the same time, she paused, her voice catching just slightly, he was my hero. When he didn't come back that day, something broke in me. And maybe I thought, if I put on the same uniform, if I ran into the same flames, maybe I'd understand why he did it. Her voice was raw, stripped of the bravado I was so used to. It was the first time I saw Riley without her armor, the reckless, fearless mask she wore. "You're not reckless because you don't care," I said softly. "You're reckless because you care too much." Her lips quirked into a half-smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just chasing ghosts. Something inside me shifted then. I had always thought of her as wildfire, untouchable, uncontrollable. But sitting beside her, listening to the quiet tremor in her voice, I realized there was more. Beneath the fire, there was fragility. A deep, aching vulnerability she rarely let anyone see. And that realization scared me even more than her recklessness. Because it made me want to protect her in return. The days after that conversation felt different. Riley still teased me, still flirted shamelessly, still drove me insane with her disregard for rules. But now, I noticed the moments between the chaos, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, the way she listened when I spoke, the way she always seemed to know when I needed silence instead of words. I caught myself watching her too long, smiling at her when I shouldn't, remembering the sound of her laugh in the quiet of my apartment. And when she brushed her hand against mine one night, accidentally, or maybe not, the warmth lingered long after she pulled away. I was falling. I knew it. And I hated myself for hesitating, for trying to resist something that felt so inevitable. One night, after dinner together, we lingered outside my building. The air was cool, the street quiet. Riley leaned against the wall, her jacket unzipped, her eyes glinting in the streetlight. "You ever think," she began, her voice low, "that maybe we're both pretending?" I frowned. "Pretending what?" "That you don't want me as much as I want you." My breath caught. She said it so simply, so boldly, as if it were just another reckless truth she couldn't keep inside. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel her warmth, smell the faint smoke still clinging to her jacket. Her hand brushed mine, her fingers lingering as if asking for permission. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to admit that she had already broken through my carefully built walls, that she scared me not because of her recklessness, but because she made me want things I'd buried for so long. The words sat on the edge of my tongue, trembling, waiting. And then her phone rang. The shrill tone cut through the night like a blade. She cursed under her breath, pulled it out, and answered quickly. I caught fragments of urgent voices, the unmistakable call of duty. Her eyes met mine, regret flickering there. "I have to go," she said. I nodded, forcing steadiness into my voice even as disappointment coiled in my chest. "Of course. Be careful." She gave me one last look, one that said everything we hadn't said aloud, before she turned and ran into the night. Sirens soon followed, fading into the distance. I stood there in the quiet, the city lights blurring around me, my heart still racing with words I hadn't spoken. I was falling for Riley. And I was terrified of what would happen if she fell too. It happened on an evening that began as ordinary as any other. I stayed late at the office, drowning in reports under the fluorescent glow of my desk lamp. The building was quiet, most of my co-workers already gone, and I told myself I'd only finish one more task before heading home. I never got the chance. The first sign was the faint smell of smoke. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe a lingering scent from outside. But then the alarms blared, piercing and relentless, and my chest seized with dread. I grabbed my bag and rushed into the hallway. People were pouring out of their offices, voices overlapping in panic. Smoke curled through the air, thin at first, then thickening by the second. The air tasted bitter, acrid. My pulse quickened as I realized this wasn't a false alarm. The stairwell was a blur of chaos, people shoving, tripping, trying to make it down as the smoke followed us. The building groaned above us, the fire spreading faster than anyone had expected. I coughed into my sleeve, fighting to keep calm, telling myself to focus, just focus on getting out. But fate wasn't kind that night. Halfway down, an explosion echoed through the building, shaking the walls and sending a wave of heat through the stairwell. The lights flickered, then went dark, plunging us into near blackness except for the glow of fire seeping in through the cracks. People screamed. I stumbled, hit the railing hard, and pain shot through my arm. The stairwell was blocked, the lower floors already burning. Panic surged through me as I realized the exits below were gone. Smoke filled my lungs, making every breath a fight. I tried another hallway, but debris rained down, cutting off the path. My vision blurred, tears stinging from the smoke. My heart pounded with the sickening thought, I might not get out. And then I heard it, her voice. Julia. Even through the chaos, I knew it instantly. Strong, desperate, and unmistakably hers. I turned, coughing, and through the haze I saw her, Riley, clad in her firefighting gear, face streaked with soot. She moved like a force of nature, pushing past debris, shouting orders to her team, her eyes locking on mine. Relief and terror crashed through me at once. Riley. I choked out, barely able to speak. She didn't hesitate. Within seconds, she was at my side, her gloved hand gripping my arm. Stay with me, she commanded, her voice steady even as flames roared around us. I wanted to argue, to tell her she shouldn't be here, shouldn't risk herself like this, but I couldn't. The smoke was too thick, my body too weak. All I could do was cling to her presence, the one solid thing in the chaos. She pulled a mask from her gear and forced it over my face, adjusting it with quick precision. Breathe, she ordered. I've got you. Her confidence was an anchor in the storm, even as the building trembled around us. She led me through the smoke-filled corridor, her arm firm around my waist when my knees threatened to buckle. Every step was a battle, but with her beside me, I kept moving. We reached a collapsed section of the hallway, fire raging beyond. Riley scanned it quickly, her jaw tight. We'll have to go through, she muttered, more to herself than me. You can't, I rasped through the mask. It's too dangerous. She glanced at me, and for a moment, her eyes softened behind the soot and determination. Everything I do looks too dangerous to you, she said quietly. But I'm not leaving you here. And then, without waiting for permission, she pushed forward. She shielded me with her body as we navigated the flames, her jacket singed, her movements fierce and unyielding. Heat pressed in from every side, suffocating, unbearable. I clung to her, half from fear, half because I knew if I let go, I'd be lost. Somehow, impossibly, she got us through to a safer corridor. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last. Another explosion rocked the building, sending debris crashing down. I stumbled, and Riley shoved me out of the way just as a beam collapsed. The impact knocked her down, trapping her leg beneath the wreckage. Riley. My scream tore from my throat as I dropped to my knees beside her. She gritted her teeth, trying to push the beam off, but it wouldn't budge. Her face twisted in pain, yet she still looked at me with steady eyes. You need to go, she said, her voice hoarse. No. I shook my head violently, tears burning through the smoke. Not without you. She reached up, her gloved hand brushing my cheek gently, a heartbreaking contrast to the destruction around us. You have to live. For me. I shook my head again, sobbing now. I can't. Her team burst through the smoke just then, shouting orders, rushing to lift the debris. Riley barked at them to get me out first, but I refused to move. I held onto her hand, clutching it like a lifeline, my heart splitting with every second. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of smoke and pain. Trust me. And then, miraculously, the beam shifted. The others heaved it away, freeing her at last. Riley winced, trying to stand, but her leg buckled beneath her. She collapsed, and I caught her before she hit the ground. She's hurt. I shouted to the others. They moved quickly, supporting her as we stumbled through the last stretch of corridor. The smoke was suffocating, the building groaning like it might collapse at any second. Every step felt like forever. But finally, we burst into the night air. Cool oxygen hit my lungs, and for a moment, the world spun around me. Sirens wailed, people shouted, medics rushed forward. But all I saw was Riley, pale beneath the soot, her breaths ragged, her eyes barely staying open. I dropped beside her as medics swarmed. Stay with me, I begged, clutching her hand. Don't you dare leave me now. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, weak but still hers. Told you, she whispered. Not invincible. And then her eyes fluttered shut. My heart stopped. The medics shouted orders, moving fast, lifting her onto a stretcher. I stumbled after them, my vision blurred with tears, every nerve in my body screaming with terror. I had thought I understood what Riley meant to me. I had thought I could keep my feelings under control. But watching her life hang in the balance, seeing her carried away in fragile stillness, I realized the truth. She wasn't just the reckless firefighter who made me lose control. She was everything. And now, I didn't know if I'd ever get the chance to tell her. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and sorrow, the kind of place where time moved strangely, too fast when doctors rushed past, too slow when you were left waiting with nothing but your fears. I sat in that waiting room for what felt like years, my hands trembling around a styrofoam cup of untouched coffee. Every sound, the squeak of shoes, the hum of machines, made my heart jump. When they finally told me I could see her, relief and terror tangled inside me. I pushed through the door, and there she was. Riley lay against white sheets, her leg bandaged, oxygen tubing trailing from her nose. Her skin was pale, streaked with soot that the nurses hadn't yet washed away, her hair a wild mess around her face. But her chest rose and fell, steady, alive. That was all I cared about. Hey, she rasped when she saw me, her voice weak, but threaded with that same infuriating humor. Guess I don't look so invincible now, huh? I tried to smile, but it broke into a choked sob. God, Riley, don't joke right now. I sank into the chair beside her, gripping her hand like if I let go, she might slip away. She squeezed back faintly. What else am I supposed to do? If I start crying, you'll never forgive me. Her attempt at lightness only made the tears spill harder. I pressed her hand against my forehead, my shoulders shaking. I thought I lost you. I thought you were gone. She went quiet, her thumb brushing against my skin in the smallest, gentlest movement. But I'm here, she whispered. I couldn't breathe, I confessed, the words tumbling out, unstoppable now. When they carried you out, when you closed your eyes, I've never been so scared in my life. I realized I can't do this without you. For a long moment, the only sound was the steady beep of her monitor. I lifted my head, meeting her gaze, terrified of what I'd see there. But Riley wasn't smirking now, wasn't teasing. Her eyes were softer than I'd ever seen, glistening with something raw and unguarded. You think you're the only one who's been scared, she murmured. Every time I run into a fire, every time I pull someone out, I tell myself I don't care if I get burned. But then I met you. And suddenly, I cared too much. My breath caught. Riley. She let out a shaky laugh, her eyes never leaving mine. I've been in love with you from the start. The first time you glared at me like I was insane, I thought, God, she's too good for me. But I couldn't stay away. I didn't want to. Tears blurred my vision again, but this time they weren't only from fear. I leaned closer, brushing her soot-streaked hair gently from her forehead. You reckless, impossible woman, I whispered. You nearly killed me with worry. And yet, I love you too. I think I've loved you longer than I've been willing to admit. For the first time since I'd known her, Riley was speechless. Her lips parted, her eyes wide, as if she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. Then a slow, trembling smile spread across her face, so fragile yet so radiant it stole my breath. You love me, she repeated, as if trying to hold onto the words. Yes, I said firmly, my voice breaking but sure. I love you. More than my fear, more than my need for control. You've set my whole world on fire, Riley, and I don't want to put it out. Her hand tightened in mine, weak but desperate, and a single tear slid down her soot-streaked cheek. Say it again, she whispered. I love you, I said, bending closer so she could feel the words against her skin. I love you. She let out a ragged breath, part laugh, part sob. God, I've been waiting to hear that. I rested my forehead against hers carefully, mindful of her injuries, and for a long moment, the world outside the hospital room disappeared. There was no fire, no smoke, no fear, only the quiet miracle of her heartbeat under my hand, and the weight of our confessions binding us together. She was still weak, her body fragile, but her spirit burned as fiercely as ever. Even lying in that hospital bed, she was still Riley, reckless, passionate, impossible. And now, she was mine. I kissed her hand softly, over and over, as if to reassure myself she was real. She smiled faintly, eyes drifting closed, exhaustion tugging her under. Rest, I whispered. I'll be right here. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, her voice barely audible. Don't go anywhere. I like having you close. I'm not leaving, I promised, tears spilling again, as I tucked the blanket around her. Not now, not ever. As she drifted into sleep, I sat beside her, my heart still racing but steadier than it had been in days. The fear hadn't vanished completely, it probably never would, but it no longer held me hostage. Because I knew, finally and fully, that love was worth the risk. And Riley, my reckless, impossible firefighter, was worth everything. Recovery was slow, but it stitched us together in ways I never could have imagined. Riley was never good at being still, she groaned through the endless hours in bed, rolling her eyes at every nurse's instruction, muttering about how she'd rather be running drills than lying useless under blankets. I made it my mission to keep her from climbing the walls. I cooked for her, even though she laughed at my questionable pancake skills. I walked with her around the block, steadying her when her leg faltered. I learned how to braid her hair when she was too sore to lift her arms, fumbling until she taught me, laughing through her pain. The house, once quiet and orderly, transformed into something brighter. Music drifted through the rooms. Riley told stories about her firefighting days, exaggerating details to make me laugh until my stomach hurt. She teased me mercilessly, but there was always softness behind her words now, as if every joke was a reminder of how grateful she was to still be here, with me. And in the evenings, when the world grew quiet, we'd sit on the couch with her head on my shoulder, her hand curled around mine. The TV would play something neither of us were paying attention to. I'd feel the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her body pressed against mine, and think, this is what it means to be alive. One night, as I stood in the kitchen, stirring soup that she insisted smelled like heaven even though it was nothing but vegetables and broth, Riley padded in behind me. She slipped her arms carefully around my waist, mindful of her healing ribs, and rested her chin on my shoulder. You're spoiling me, she murmured. You saved my life, I whispered back. This is the least I can do. She kissed the side of my neck, soft and lingering. You saved mine too. You just don't realize it. Her words struck me, but before I could ask what she meant, she turned me gently around. Her eyes, still rimmed with fading bruises, shone with that fire that had terrified and captivated me from the moment we met. I used to think I didn't care about what happened to me, she said quietly. Every call, every fire, I told myself I could handle it. If I didn't come back one day, it wouldn't matter. But then you walked into my life, and suddenly everything mattered. Coming home mattered. Living mattered. You mattered. Tears burned my eyes. I reached up, brushing my fingers against her cheek. You reckless, impossible woman, I said, echoing the words I'd spoken at her hospital bedside. You turned my whole world upside down. I thought control was what kept me safe, but all it did was keep me lonely. You made me lose control, Riley, and somehow, you gave me back my life. Her breath hitched, and for once, she didn't have a joke ready. She just kissed me, slow, tender, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. After that night, life slipped into a rhythm that was both new and deeply familiar. We healed together, her body, my heart. I learned to let go, to laugh when things went wrong, to embrace the mess and beauty of living without a plan. She learned to slow down sometimes, to let someone take care of her, to rest without guilt. We went for long walks as her strength returned, our fingers intertwined, conversations spilling easily between us. She'd point out clouds shaped like animals, and I'd roll my eyes, but secretly I loved every second of it. We cooked meals together, flour ending up on her nose, sauce on my shirt, both of us doubled over with laughter at how disastrously perfect it was. And when we lay in bed at night, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt more at home than I ever had in my life. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and rose through the window, I watched Riley leaning back against the pillows, her hair glowing in the fading light. She looked at me with that mischievous half-smile I'd come to love, and my chest swelled with so much emotion it almost hurt. I don't say this enough, I told her, my voice thick. You didn't just save me from that fire. You saved me from myself, from the walls I built, from the fear that kept me from living. You taught me how to love, Riley. You taught me how to feel. Her hand found mine, squeezing tight. And you taught me what it's like to have something worth fighting for. I leaned down, kissing her softly, tasting salt and warmth and the undeniable truth of us. When I pulled back, I whispered the words that had been waiting on my tongue for so long. She made me lose control, but when she risked it all for me, I realized she was the only one I wanted to hold on to. And in her arms, I finally felt free.